Okay, so the other day I filmed a video of me transitioning one of my plants into LECA, and so just because that's what I've been really doing this season, and I thought it would be really helpful to kind of synthesize it into an initial introduction to LECA because I have been loving it so much. So when I went through the footage of me transitioning this plant, there was a video that just stopped recording partway. So I thought that in addition to the demoing, I would kind of sit down and talk through it. And so there's the option to, if you want the gist of it, go and watch the demo. I'll put in on either side, I'll put a little tag. Also have in the description the time to skip to. And if you want to, hear it and kind of see some other plants and how they're doing, then go and watch the demo. That's also an option. So just kind of covering all bases, I guess. I will also say real fast that if this video, I don't have Kyle home right now to help me with a fancy setup, so I hope the quality is all right. So starting off, LECA is a different potting medium than soils. LECA stands for lightweight, expandable clay aggregate, and it just kind of looks like pebbles, kind of pumicey. There are different types. Some are really circular, some are irregular, and I really like the irregular, even though the circular ones that are all uniform might be really aesthetically pleasing. When you have bigger plants, they're not going to really weigh them down. You need the different shapes and pebble sizes to be able to kind of lock them together, and it really helps, especially if you've got any top-heavy plants or any viners, really helps with the stability. There's also, I don't want to call it a debate, but a lot of people call it semi-hydro, and that's not exactly the proper term. There's also passive hydro, but I don't think that matters for me just doing this hobby. I'm just going to call it LECA, just because that is the medium. There are lots of different brands of it, and so just kind of generalizing it as LECA. Initially transitioning, it does have a bit of a price up front. I think I've needed 30 liters to convert the majority of my plant collection into LECA, and each 10-liter bag was around $13, and so that was almost $40. Then fertilizer, a lot of systems are 3-part systems, and then they also have pH up, pH down. A lot of people are very good at being very particular and intentional, and they're testing their pH, and they're doing all the different nutrients, but for me, I am kind of one of those who's been a lot more lax with it. I only have one fertilizer and I don't do any pH testing, and so far I haven't had any issues. They'll often have a bloom nutrient, they'll have one to kind of help with the root system, and then they'll also have another fertilizer just for general growth, and I just kind of use the general growth because I don't have a lot of blooming plants and I really focus on foliage, and so for me I just decided to buy one nutrient bottle, and I do think it's going to last me a really long time just because you dilute it so much. I also love just water propagating in general, and there's some plants that I've always just had in water, and so there's a lot of plants that I don't even think I will fertilize that much just because they do really great in water. So I don't feel like they truly need it. That's just my take on it. A lot of people are very specific, very intentional, and very good at it, but for me, the lazier approach has worked just fine so far. So as far as transitioning, most of my plants are small or medium sized, and they all transitioned so well, and so the video is me transitioning. At that point, the largest plant I had transitioned, and I didn't even take a video of what it looked like before, but it was in a much larger container. With LECA, I also find that if you kind of downsize the container, it helps. Maybe it's just in my head, but I do kind of downsize, and that also helps me kind of keep things more compact, continue to use the pots that I already have so I don't have to go purchase larger things, so that's also kind of nice. At least for me, I sometimes cut down the roots depending on how big the plant is, and so I can really kind of keep things minimal and compact. So far, I haven't had any issues, but I know a lot of people struggle with transitioning larger plants. That's why I was a little more aggressive with following good care techniques, just because this was the largest plant at that point that I had put into LECA, so I was trying to be really diligent and giving it the best chance it had. So the first thing with LECA is you want to really rinse it outside because it's clay, there's a lot of dust, so rinse it outside. I want to protect my plumbing as much as possible, so always rinse things outside. Same with when I take the initiative off of roots. I know a lot of people who do it in their shower, and I try to do that outside, get as much off as possible. What I do is I take whatever plant it is outside and I unpot it and I get as much dirt off as possible. I've learned, well, I will say for the most part, I like philodendrons, pothos, plants that have good thick root systems, not like the really fragile, dainty things. And so I'm a little more aggressive with really like taking each root and really pulling off the dirt, especially with the ZZ that I did, since it just has such tuberous roots. I was really aggressive with it. If there's any roots that just aren't the healthiest, I'll just cut them off, let it grow the healthiest roots it can. And I'm in this LECA Facebook group, and so there's always people asking, like, do I really have to get that much dirt off? You kind of do. If you don't, then you are going to have to spend a lot more time the first month or so when it's in LECA, where you're really going to have to almost unpot it every time and really just try to get more and more dirt off, because if you have dirt in there, then it might rot in the LECA, even though you've transitioned it like to get out of the root rot system. So that's why you're really cutting off the bad roots and really getting that dirt off. Sometimes it also helps to soak the roots to get the dirt off. I found that I don't have to do that too much. Some people really like to unpot and transition when their plants are dry. I've done it both, and I don't like doing it dry just because there's so much like fine particles everywhere. So for me, once I get as much dirt off outside, then I will bring in the plant, then I will be working in my kitchen sink. And another thing that people do is they use hydrogen peroxide. I don't always do that. I've only done it a couple times. For me, it just kind of depends on how the plant's already doing. And I did it with this larger plant because it is a larger plant, and I was really worried about that transition. To the ZZ plant I got a couple months ago, and ever since I got it, it just started declining, and so I had a feeling that it was overwatered, and so didn't want to do it at first just because it was such a large plant. I thought it would be so hard to get all the dirt off, but it ended up being so much easier than I thought. Really grateful for that. It was having root rot. I was a lot more aggressive with, if it was tangled and the root didn't look great, I'd just pull it apart. And some people dilute their hydrogen peroxide, some people don't. I just dilute it with whatever just feels right at the time. Again, kind of lax with it. So what I would do is I bring them inside, I spray down the roots, and then I'll let them sit, or I'll even soak them in a hydrogen peroxide solution. And again, I don't always use hydrogen peroxide. I've only done it a handful of times, and everything else I've done that hasn't had it has also been fine. So I think it's really just kind of situation to situation, as well as what plant it is, and most of my plants are all perfect for LECA. Again, cutting roots is not always necessary. I don't always cut roots. I don't normally cut roots unless it just isn't a healthy root, but with the ZZ, I just didn't have a big enough container for it, so I definitely cut the roots down a lot, and I think it's going to be just fine. So far, I've had no issues, and I've cut down other roots, and I haven't had issues as well, but a lot of the time I don't feel like I need to, just because once I'm getting the dirt off, the roots are smaller, and just because you are going to get little roots that come off in the dirt anyways, and it's not a big deal. Transitioning is the hardest part, just because the plants have to grow water roots, and so water roots are going to be white. They're going to be kind of fuzzy, and it's fun because with LECA, depending on how you pot it up, you can really see what's happening with the roots. Everyone does it different. I'm still fairly new to this, but it has been so beneficial for my plants and my relationship with my plants. It's been really nice. And so some things I do might not be technically proper, but I haven't had any issues so far. I think people can do whatever works for them. It's not a big deal. So this is all just my experience. So I pulled some of the plants, including the one that you'll see in the demonstration video, I guess. And I have some different systems for how I do it. There's one pot systems, there's two pot systems, and there's like self-watering systems. And I have all three of those, and it's a lot simpler than you might think. These are some Monstera Propagations, and this is just a glass water bottle. So you can see I have the water level here, which is much higher than you'll see me in the video putting the ZZ plant. And since these were water propagated, I plant swapped for these. So since these were water propagated, they were used to just sitting in water. And so I did put the water level up higher, but I still don't have any roots touching the water level. But if I did, it wouldn't really matter. Like, Monsteras are great for LECA. This is the smaller ZZ that I potted up in the video. In the video, I just kind of separated them out just because my container was honestly just too small to hold it all. And so these are the ones that weren't doing as great. The roots just weren't as healthy, but I don't expect to have any issues. This is a pot with no drainage, and it's actually an IKEA pot, and then this is just a nursery pot. And so they're planted up in here with the LECA, and then I just filled the nursery pot with just a little bit of water, and I don't do any nutrients at first either, so I'm not going to talk about nutrients at all, because that is after they've been in LECA for like a month or so. Anyways, two pot system. With the ZZ, they don't need that much water. With other plants, like if I see that the water's dried up, I can just top it off kind of whenever and then wait for a flush day, which is kind of the general maintenance day. But with most plants, I just kind of throughout the week, if I just happen to check, oh no, this one needs a little more water, I'll just top it off. So this is kind of a two pot as well. It's just a nursery pot, and then I have actually a pan in here to help set it up a little higher because this pot is so large. This one I actually could probably add a little bit of water to. This is another Monstera that I propagated a long time ago. But it was so tiny when I first propagated it, and I propagated it in soil. It looks like it's 2-pot, but this is also like a self-watering sort of situation. And so you can see that there's just this piece of yarn, and then there's water in the bottom of this pot. So what I do is I just put yarn through the nursery pot holes and put LECA in, put the plant in, and so the end of the yarn is kind of somewhere in maybe the first third or bottom half of the nursery pot. And so I do this only really when I have 2 pots that have such a large gap, like if the bottom of the pot comes down to here and then there's just that much gap and I don't want to fill it up with that much water, and so I'll use the self-watering. So the idea is that synthetic yarn is going to pull the water up into the LECA. A big part of LECA is just the idea that the plants get to really choose when they drink. I only have a few like this, but like I said, I haven't had any issues. They've all been doing great. So this is kind of another example of one pot, and then also how you can kind of better see what's going on when you have your plants in LECA sometimes. Glass is really popular because then you get to really look at the roots and what's going on in there. You can also get a lot of things at the dollar store instead of spending so much on fancy pots and whatnot, especially for propagations like mason jars or just whatever you can find at the dollar store. So this is my Raven ZZ. I also got this out of a plant swap, which is super exciting. I had it for quite a while and it just wasn't growing, and I was so nervous that it wasn't rooting at all or anything. And eventually I took it out of soil and put it in LECA. It has done so well. You can see the roots, and again I have the water. This one I have filled up a little more just because the roots don't go down too far, and so I have the water a little bit below the roots because I don't want actual roots touching the water. You can see I have a new shoot coming up. I'm so excited because it's just full of leaves. Imagine the next couple weeks it'll unfurl, and then I don't even know how long it's going to take it for it to turn into this dark raven color. I'm so excited, and since this one did so well, that's what eventually led me to do my big ZZ. I love this plant. So this is the plant that you'll see in the video. It was in a much larger soil container. I got it just kind of at a department store because it was a really good deal. What happens with that is, it's not like a nursery, so there's a good chance it wasn't being properly taken care of, and with ZZs, they don't like to be watered that often. When I got it, I just could tell that it was declining, and I had stalks that were turning yellow, and I just was so worried to put it into LECA because it just was a huge pot of roots, and I didn't want to have to detangle and get all the dirt off, but I did it, and it kind of helped that some of the stalks rotted because then it gave me more space and it was a little easier to separate. Anyways, it's been doing really well. I will say it hasn't been too long, but so far I haven't had any issues. But with this plant especially, since it's in a shallower container for the root size, I really needed the irregular LECA. If I did not have that, if I just used the spherical, there's no way this would be stable. They would have all just fallen out. I'm probably going to be checking the roots on this fairly often. And again, with this ZZ, I make sure that I don't have any roots touching water. That's very important. Once they kind of grow water roots and the roots grow into the water, it's not as big of a deal. But initially, and of course, with plants like a ZZ who, they don't really care for water, you don't want them touching the water at first. That's all I can really think of right now. Like I said, I'll put in all the footage I have and me explaining things as well, but just in case I miss something there or I miss something here, you can watch them together. I watched a fair amount of videos before I transitioned to LECA, then just kind of really looked at each plant that I was considering because I do think you need to have general plant knowledge. I love Facebook plant groups, and I'm in swapping groups. I'm in general houseplant groups, gardening groups, and I joined a LECA group. It's been really helpful. At first, it just gave me the courage to just jump in and do it. I'm so glad I did. So this is probably my biggest success story. This is Monstera Adansonii. I bought this a long time ago, a couple years back, when it was still really hard to find, and I paid a lot of money for when I bought it, it was probably about just this one section. I had it in soil for a couple years maybe, but it grew this huge long trail, and so then I chopped it up to try to make it fuller, and I found that I could not get it to propagate in soil. Then I had to, put them in water. I tried to actually sell it and get rid of it, but then no one viewed my post, and so fine, I might as well just try to save it. I don't want it to die. I paid a lot of money for it, so I put it in LECA. Probably add water to this one actually. 2-pot system, and you can see there's a root growing through that, which is crazy. I hadn't seen that yet. Within 2 weeks, this whole new shoot came out, and this new leaf here, new leaf here, new leaf here. It was just insane. Anyways, I've loved LECA. It's been amazing. My plants have loved it. That's kind of my intro to LECA. Okay, so here's my crazy setup. This was in a really large container, and basically what I did is I took it outside and I unpotted it. Then I went through and I rinsed off as much dirt as possible, really pulled it apart, and this was a very large plant, so that was really difficult, took a lot of time, but you need to have as much dirt off as possible. And then I also had to rinse the remaining LECA that I had. And then I have compost and garbage. I'm actually trimming the roots because they were starting to rot and they're just so crazy and huge. So I'm trimming those into my compost. And then I have a couple containers of watered down hydrogen peroxide solution, and then I have a spray bottle with hydrogen peroxide and water as well. So I brought them all in this bag, and then I just kind of started going through one by one. First I rinsed and sprayed, let them sit, and then I went through and I'm cutting and then spraying again, and then kind of letting them soak in the solution as well, if that makes sense at all. And this is the largest plant that I have put into LECA, and so it's been a process, been a very, very big and crazy process, but that's all right. Trim the roots, I rinse, spray again, and then I stick it in this bucket of solution with the others. Hopefully I got some footage that is viewable, but basically what I'm doing now is I'm letting them soak for just a little bit, and then I'm actually going to go through and separate the root systems that are really, really amazing and I know are going to make it, and then some that might be more questionable, I'm going to separate them out. I'm going to have at least one full-size plant that's really, truly thriving. And so I have this is just a Tupperware that I got from the dollar store, and I'm going to put it in to this basket, and so that's where going to be. And so I'm not going to do a cache pot with this. I'm just going to try to keep the water level really low and hope that they're happy with that. That's what I'm doing with my Raven ZZ right now, and it is putting out a new shoot, and so excited about that. So hopefully they'll be happy with this. I know it's not the best, most perfect size, but I don't have a bigger pot that I can use like this, and I don't have like a bigger 2-pot system that would work either. So that's what we're going to go with. So what I'm personally looking for are the healthiest rhizomes, they're called. I think it's rhizomes, but basically these like potato-like structures, that's kind of what I'm really looking for, is the ones that look the healthiest, as well as the fuller shoots. So I did trim the roots a little bit, but I tried to really leave some untouched. And I will say for the most part, they all look pretty good. It's just a couple smaller ones that are questionable. So right now, this is what I have as my questionables. It's just like three stems, and then one stem that just came out, so it doesn't even have a root system. Depending on how full this gets, I might put this in there as well. So the camera stopped recording, but that's totally fine because I decided to add this stock in anyway, so I have to do it all over. So it's fine. I just need a place to put these. And this is very much the biggest plant that I have transferred into LECA. Since it is a ZZ plant, I want to make sure I have a good solid layer of LECA on the bottom that the initial roots will not be touching whatsoever, because I don't want them drowning in water. So that is what I have here. And I would love to use like a 2-pot system, but I just don't have something. And so I'm going to really just go with this. Cost me $1, so it's fine. So this container is clearly pushing the limits, but I'm just going to keep going with it. Normally, I've found that when I'm potting something up in LECA, it's easiest to kind of keep everything bundled. So put an initial layer of LECA, bundle everything together, and then pour around. But because this has so much roots, I feel like I've actually kind of been able to arrange it, which is kind of nice. But then I'm going to go through, I'm going to pour LECA around it and then kind of start shaking things, because when you add in water, it's really going to shift around a lot. And same thing with like soil, like until you water it, you don't really get the full effect. I like the look of the ZZ stems kind of like fanning out. I also find that it's helpful to use like another pot to kind of pour it in around. And again, I kind of jiggle everything to try to help get things down lower. Definitely use an irregular LECA. They have the ones where they're all just like little uniform spheres, and those can look really nice, but they're not going to help really weigh your plant down and keep it from just tumbling out. But then the irregular ones can all kind of shift together to form a more sturdy foundation for the root system. And then I also try to, since the used roots will have like multiple stems, I try to really kind of get some LECA in between to kind of help space the stems. And sometimes you really got to search for like a small piece to like really fit in to help anchor a spot, or something with a bigger piece. It's really nice to use the irregular. So I do kind of shake it down. So this is kind of how I have it potted up. since it's a ZZ, I'm not too worried about having a little bit of roots on top of the LECA. I have as much packed down there as I can. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add just like a little bit of water. I don't really want any of the roots actually touching the water right now. I'm not going to fertilize either. I'm just going to do water. I'm also not too particular about how I have it potted up right now because there's a good chance that I will unpot it within maybe in 1 week or 2 weeks, see how things are going if I can't tell just from like looking through, or just for fun because I do that. Adding the water, also pouring it from the top, will really help things shift around. And then I'll probably add in a few more after that just to make sure it's really stable. There is my water pitcher. I gotta go find my water pitcher. So I pour a little water and then I kind of shake it around because it will shift around a lot. So you can see the water level. Now I don't really have any roots touching it. And of course I'm like not fully straight on, but it's not too high, and then this is kind of where I'm gonna leave it. So for the next 15 minutes it's probably gonna shift around a bit and I'm just gonna play with it a little bit. LECA is easy. LECA at first is kind of a pain just to transition, but then I love it. Like, it's the best, but it's a little messy and a pain at first, but worth it. Okay, so I just did the other stalks. And again, I'm not like super worried about these, but I just know that their chance is probably not as great. So this, I'm using the 2-pot method because I have a little system that fits for this. So they're in a nursery pot, and then this container has no holes and has water about you can see from here, it's about, I don't know, 1.5 inches up. I'm actually probably going to dump out a little water, but I like to keep it at like 1/3 of a level, and it'll just chill in here, and that's how it works. And again, I'm not too worried about how I potted this up because the first part is all about the transition and checking to make sure that you have water roots and that you got all the dirt off, etc. So I'm not too worried about how I have it potted up. And now I have to clean up everything. Like I said, I'm still fairly new at this, so I'm sure there's lots of techniques I don't know, lots of things I don't know. If there are better resources, shout them out. If you have any advice, shout it out. I love the plant community. It's one of my favorite communities to just be a part of.